After 15 years of marriage, I'm haunted by my wife's infidelity. As our daughters leave for college, I'm finally facing the truth. Is it time to let go? My wife cheated on me 15 years ago. Her affair lasted a couple of weeks. I was really hurt at the time, but we also had twin daughters who were 3, and for me, my kids were my utmost priority, and I did not want them to struggle at all. So I decided to stay with wife, who followed all the reconciliation steps. It took me a couple of years to regain my love for my wife after she spent a lot of effort to better herself and our relationship. However, I had never forgotten the affair, and my wife cheating on me was always on the back of my mind. It's been 15 years now, and our marriage is not without its ups and downs, but we've also gone on vacations, do date nights often, and our relationship is still pretty romantic. Our daughters turned 18 a few months ago, and they are both in university now. I am really proud of both of them and could not be happier. But now that they're both in college, and now that they're independent and entering adulthood, I have been seriously considering the possibility of a divorce. As a parent, I think I have done my job and have done my best to raise them in a loving home. I do love my wife, and if I ask her for a divorce, it will completely blindside her. But I still haven't forgotten my wife cheating on me 15 years ago, and it will always be on the back of my mind as long as we're married. Would be I the AH for considering divorce? Update 1. I've been thinking a lot about my situation lately, and it's a mix of feelings I can't quite shake off. It's been 15 years since my wife's affair, and I thought I had moved past it, but it keeps creeping back into my mind. I used to believe that I could bury the pain, but lately it's like a stubborn weed that refuses to die. Our daughters are off to university now, and as I look at them, I feel a wave of nostalgia mixed with regret. They're thriving, and I'm proud of them. But I can't help but think about the sacrifices I made to keep this family together. I remember the early days after the affair, the way my wife threw herself into repairing our marriage. She did everything right, attending counseling sessions and showing me love in ways I had almost forgotten existed. We went on vacations, had regular date nights, and at times I felt like we were reconnecting. Yet that shadow of betrayal never fully left me. I kept pushing it to the back of my mind, but now, with the girls starting their adult lives, the weight of it feels heavier than ever. As I ponder divorce, I keep asking myself if I would be the asshole for considering it. I love my wife, and she loves me too, but the trust has always been a fragile thing. I can see the love in her eyes, but every time she touches me, my brain plays that old record, the one that reminds me of the betrayal. I feel like I'm on a merry-go-round of emotions, constantly going in circles without any real progress. After posting my initial thoughts online, I was surprised by the responses. Some folks told me to move on, to let the past be the past. Others encouraged me to seek happiness for myself. One comment that stuck with me said, "You can't build a future on a foundation of resentment." It struck a chord, and I realized I've been living in a kind of limbo, neither fully committed nor completely free. I've been trying to reconcile my love for her with my unresolved feelings about her betrayal. I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with my wife. I approached the topic cautiously, trying to find the right words without sending her into a panic. I told her how I've been feeling distant, how I've struggled with the memories of her affair, and how it's affecting my perception of our relationship. To my surprise, she listened intently, without getting defensive or angry. Instead, she shared that she had sensed my distance and felt guilty for her past actions. We talked for hours, and during that conversation, I could see the pain in her eyes. It reminded me that we both carry scars from those years, and maybe we've both been living with our own secrets. I mentioned the possibility of seeking couples therapy, and she agreed without hesitation. It felt like a step in the right direction, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that we might be prolonging the inevitable. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. I kept replaying our conversation in my head and while I appreciated her willingness to open up, I was still haunted by that old fear. Would therapy help us heal, or would it just bring everything back to the surface, exposing wounds that have barely begun to scab over? I wondered if I was fooling myself by thinking that we could find our way back to each other, or if I was just too afraid to face the reality of our situation. As I prepared for our first therapy session, I felt a mix of dread and hope. I wanted to believe that there was a chance for us to work through this, but a part of me feared the worst. What if it turned out that the betrayal would always overshadow our love? What if I couldn't fully forgive her, no matter how much time had passed? I kept asking myself whether I was ready to explore those dark corners of our relationship, or if I should just cut my losses and move on. In therapy, we sat across from each other, both nervous yet determined. The therapist encouraged us to speak openly, to share our feelings without holding back. It was a struggle at first, but slowly, we began to unpack years of unspoken tension. I shared my fears about the affair and how it still felt fresh, like a wound that refused to heal. To my surprise, my wife opened up about her guilt and how she had been working on herself since then. We both cried, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were truly connecting. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. We agreed to keep coming back, to work through our issues together. I left that session feeling lighter, as if we had taken a tiny step toward healing. But the nagging thought remained. Could we truly mend what had been broken? Or was I just postponing the inevitable? Update 2. As the weeks turned into months, therapy became a regular part of our lives. We would go in, lay everything on the table, and confront the feelings we had buried for so long. It was like digging up the roots of a tree that had been growing in the same spot for years, and each session unearthed something new. The therapist was skilled at guiding us through the emotions that often left us feeling raw and exposed. It was exhausting, but oddly liberating. I started sharing more about my feelings of resentment and distrust, while my wife revealed her own insecurities and fears. She spoke about how she had felt unworthy of my love after the affair, and how she had tried to be the perfect wife ever since. It was heartbreaking to hear, and it struck me that we had both been living in a state of fear of losing each other, fear of the past, and fear of what our future might hold. During one session, we stumbled upon something unexpected. As we discussed the dynamics of our relationship, my wife revealed that she had been keeping a journal. At first, I was taken aback. Why would she feel the need to write about our problems without sharing it with me? But then she explained that writing was her way of processing everything, a form of self-therapy that had helped her cope with her guilt and the weight of our past. She offered to share it with me, and I hesitated. Part of me was scared to dive into her thoughts, but another part of me was curious. When I finally read her journal, it was like peeling back layers of a complex onion. She detailed her feelings of regret and confusion, the nights she spent wondering if I would ever truly forgive her. She wrote about her struggles to be the perfect mother and wife, all while feeling unworthy of my love. I saw the depth of her emotions, the way she had wrestled with her own demons, and it stirred something within me. I realized that I had been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't fully acknowledged hers. I began to understand that her affair was not just a betrayal. It was a symptom of deeper issues within both of us. We had both been carrying our own burdens, and perhaps we needed to meet each other halfway. Therapy sessions became a place for healing. We talked about boundaries, trust, and the things that had driven us apart. We also laughed, something I hadn't expected. The humor started to creep back into our conversations, like sunlight breaking through a dense fog. I could see that the connection we once had was still there, flickering but not extinguished. Yet, even with all this progress, doubts lingered. There were days when I felt a surge of love for her, and others where I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I began questioning whether love alone was enough to sustain our relationship. Could we really rebuild the trust that had been shattered? I started to wonder if this path of healing was just a way to delay the inevitable, or if it could actually lead to a stronger bond. As our therapy journey continued, we began to explore the idea of setting new goals together. We decided to plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us, to rekindle the romance and remind ourselves of the reasons we fell in love in the first place. We picked a cozy cabin in the woods, far from distractions and the weight of our daily lives. The anticipation built as the date approached, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would this trip be a turning point for us, or just another reminder of what was lost? When we arrived at the cabin, I felt the tension between us start to ease. The beauty of nature surrounded us, and it was as if we had stepped into a different world, one where we could temporarily forget the struggles of the past. We spent our days hiking, laughing, and reminiscing about our early years together. For the first time in a long while, I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crack. It was liberating to let go, even just a little. But as the weekend drew to a close, a sense of dread began to settle in. I knew we would have to return to reality, to our unresolved issues, and I couldn't help but wonder if we were just kidding ourselves. Was this a genuine healing experience, or just a fleeting escape? The weight of that question loomed large as we drove back home, the silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. Update 3. Coming back home from that getaway was surreal. I thought we had made progress, but the reality of our everyday lives came rushing back, along with all the unresolved issues we had swept under the rug. We resumed therapy sessions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were teetering on the edge of something significant. The progress we had made felt fragile, like a house of cards that could collapse with a single breath. During one session, the therapist asked us what our ideal relationship would look like moving forward. I hesitated, unsure of how to answer. My wife spoke first, sharing her vision of a future filled with trust, laughter, and mutual respect. She talked about wanting to create a safe space for both of us, a place where we could share our fears without judgment. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and for a moment, I was filled with hope. When it was my turn to speak, I found myself grappling with my thoughts. I wanted to believe in that vision, but I felt this nagging doubt lingering in the back of my mind. I expressed my fear of repeating the past, of being blindsided again, and how that fear had held me back from fully committing to our marriage. The therapist nodded, guiding us through the discussion. We began to explore our definitions of trust and how it could be rebuilt. My wife shared that she had started to understand the depth of her actions and how they had affected me. She admitted that she had often placed the weight of our happiness solely on her shoulders, thinking she could fix everything on her own. This realization seemed to bring us closer together, as we both acknowledged our individual roles in the complexities of our relationship. As the weeks rolled on, I started noticing small changes in both of us. My wife began to communicate more openly, sharing her thoughts and feelings without fear of backlash. She became more vulnerable, and with that vulnerability came a newfound strength. I, too, began to open up, addressing my feelings of resentment and fear more directly. One afternoon, during a particularly intense therapy session, I found myself overwhelmed with emotion. I expressed how I felt trapped between the love I still held for her and the pain of her betrayal. I felt like I was in a tug of war, with both sides pulling me in different directions. The therapist encouraged me to explore what that love meant now, after everything we had been through. After the session, as we walked to the car, I noticed a shift. My wife reached for my hand, a simple gesture that carried a weight I hadn't felt in years. It was as if we were slowly breaking down the walls we had built around ourselves. As we drove home, the conversation flowed more easily. We talked about our daughters, shared jokes, and even reminisced about our early days together, the moments that had made us fall in love in the first place. But just when I thought we were making progress, a bombshell dropped. One evening, my wife came home from a therapy session, visibly shaken. She sat me down, her eyes filled with tears, and told me that her therapist had encouraged her to confront her reasons for cheating. She had discovered that part of her infidelity stemmed from deep-seated insecurities about her worthiness as a partner and a mother. I listened, feeling a mix of sympathy and frustration. While I understood that her past actions were rooted in her struggles, it felt like yet another layer of complexity added to our already tangled relationship. I had been hoping for resolution, but instead, we were diving even deeper into the emotional muck. Over the next few days, I found myself wrestling with the information she shared. It was painful to realize that her betrayal was tied to her own feelings of inadequacy. I wanted to support her, but I also felt a surge of anger. I thought about all those years I had spent trying to forgive her, all the moments where I had let my guard down only to have it raised again. I questioned if I could truly forgive her if we were continually uncovering new layers of her pain. During our next therapy session, I brought up my concerns. I expressed how hard it was for me to be a part of her healing journey while still grappling with my own hurt. I felt like we were navigating a minefield, trying to avoid triggering each other while still addressing our individual issues. The therapist guided us through this, helping us recognize that healing is not linear, and it often brings up unexpected challenges. As we worked through this, I began to notice a change in my own mindset. Instead of viewing her journey as a burden, I started seeing it as a collaborative effort. We were both trying to learn and grow, to redefine what our relationship meant. I realized that healing required patience and understanding, not just from her, but from me as well. Weeks turned into months, and as we continued to explore our feelings, I began to see glimmers of hope. The small moments of joy started to outweigh the lingering pain. We laughed more, connected more, and slowly built new memories. I even caught myself daydreaming about the future again, a future where we could navigate life together, hand in hand. However, just as things were starting to look up, a curveball came our way. One of our daughters, whom we thought was thriving in college, called us one evening in tears. She revealed that she was struggling with her classes and feeling overwhelmed. She mentioned that she had been feeling the pressure to succeed, and it broke my heart to hear her in such distress. As we worked to support her through this tough time, I noticed a shift in my perspective. My own struggles with trust and betrayal began to fade into the background as I focused on being there for my daughter. It felt like a much-needed distraction from my own pain, and it reminded me of the importance of family, of being there for each other no matter what. In those moments, I realized that life is messy and complicated, and relationships are no different. While I still had questions about my marriage, the truth was that love comes in many forms, and it's not always easy to define. Maybe, just maybe, the journey of healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a new future together. As we navigated our daughter's challenges, my wife and I found ourselves working as a team again. We communicated openly about how we could best support her, and in doing so, we began to rekindle our own connection. That's when I understood that relationships require ongoing effort and commitment. They are never truly fixed, but they can evolve. I still don't know where my marriage will ultimately lead, but for the first time in a long while, I feel like there's a possibility for something new. A possibility that maybe, just maybe, we can find a way forward together, hand in hand, through whatever challenges life throws our way. As I sit here reflecting on everything we've been through, I realize that healing takes time, but it's a journey worth taking, no matter how rocky the road may be.